Catflap Chat, episode 44. I have the honour today of being joined by what many could see potentially as a controversial figure, but the guy who brought through the regions in the WRU, probably most famous for up in this part of the world, Mr. David Moffett. Thank you very much for coming on. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very good, Mikey, and thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to it, and I've been doing quite a few poddies, as I call them.
Yeah.
Since announcing Rugby Rules, but yeah, it's good fun. I'm having a great time.
So let's start with that then, because there is a million things I've got kind of written down in terms of what you've done and achieved, and this can go off wherever you want it to go today. I'm an open book, so Rugby Rules, talk to me about it. I've got all the rules written here in front of me, been researching them. Tell me where this has been born from and what's going on.
Okay, so for a good number of years now, I've become quite disenchanted with the way in which the game is going. You know, I mean, it is it's bizarre in actual fact. If you just look at one of the laws of the game, the ruck law, you were to go and look at it, and you would see all these nice drawings that the World Rugby have got on, you know, their laws. And you look at the ruck law and you say, well, I've never seen a ruck like that ever, you know, in the last whatever number of years. And it's actually quite disgraceful, because not only do World Rugby not insist on their own laws being applied, but the referees don't either. And of course, I can understand that. Being an ex-referee, you're not going to go and stand out and try and be a leader. Otherwise, you'd never referee another international. Talking about the highest. But it is. I mean, it's outrageous that and I'm not asking you to look at it now, but you know, you and your listeners perhaps could go and look at that law and just say, well, what is going on here? So, I mean, there's that. There's the way in which the game has moved forward. You know, the game is no longer a contact sport; it's a collision sport.
Yeah.
You have to be 100 kg and do, 100 meters in 11 seconds just to get a run in the back anywhere other than scrum half. And the way in which they play the game is to actually smash into the people to try and get across the gain line to get the other players. And I mean, it's just dangerous. And we've seen, I mean, there's a lot of talk about concussion in rugby and the number of players that are having to leave the game early. And if you work, I mean, I could do the research but I don't need to, because it's there for everybody to see. So that's something that's really concerning. And it's not so much the head contact area either. It's also the whiplash, which is causing a lot of these problems. So I think that's a concern. And that was brought home when Brodie Retallick, who I regard as play the game, was taken out by Snyman in this so-called cleaning out, which was absolute rubbish, and spent 3 months on the sideline with a shoulder injury, and was not at his best at the World Cup. And there are so many stories of players having to now, leave the game early. You've got coaches like well, all of them really, who even in contact at training, are putting players through stuff the body's never been designed for. That's at the top level. That's at the 0.1% level. So you can imagine when everybody's trying to emulate the way the game's played at the professional level, down to the 99.9% of guys who just want to run around in the valleys or, their local club or whatever. But that's the genesis of it, really. That's one I said to myself, perhaps I could write some variations to the laws to make the game better to watch, play, and coach and referee. And then I quickly realized that the number of changes that need to be made, there is no way that World Rugby is ever going to listen. They wouldn't listen to me They wouldn't listen to me anyway, because they're an organization that believes they're never wrong, essentially. And they're not going to have somebody like me come along and suggest it. that they should and adopt what Rugby Rules, for example, because if they were to do that, they would be admitting that they've been going in the wrong direction.
You ruffle too many feathers.
Well, yes, but I don't do it without good reason, Mikey. I mean, I'm the sort of person that I don't just bitch about something, but I offer solutions.
Yeah.
As well. And my time in Wales was like that. Even though I know that I'm not the favourite son of Pontypridd, it's just the way I am. I'm straightforward. You can ask me anything, I'll answer it, and I've been like that ever since I've been in rugby administration. And I'm not worried too much about being PC.
Do you think that scares some people at the top in various organisations?
Most likely, yeah. I think it most likely does, but that's their problem, not mine. I'm going to, so I'm just the way I am. I suppose, I mean, I was born in Yorkshire. Be very careful, mate. See, I wasn't born in England. I was born in Yorkshire. And there's a big difference.
Yeah.
And then raised in Kenya, and Tanganyika then, and then moved to Australia. So I've sort of got that mix of Yorkshire and Australia sort of brashness, if you like, and
that grit.
Straightforward. Yeah, possibly. So anyway, there's the background for Rugby Rules. And when I started writing what I thought would be some good law variations, I thought, I'm really at a point here where I'm writing an offshoot of rugby. So I called it Rugby Rules. I pinched rules from Aussie rules. And a lot of people talk about rules. I'm a traditionalist in that regard. I still call them laws. But so I figured Rugby Rules, it runs off the tongue quite well.
Yeah.
And and there's some. Well, you've read it. You've read them, Mikey. And if anybody listening to the podcast is interested, you can always go to www.rugbyrules.world. And it wasn't until I was looking at domain names that I realized you can get .world. So I figured, that's a nice sort of domain name to have, especially seeing as we're going, this world rugby. So it was a
global
little
market.
bit of well, so it was just a little bit. I thought it was quite good. Actually.
Just putting the little fishing hook out there, see what happens.
Yeah.
So I've got the rules here. I mean, I won't fly through them all now, but 14 aside. So obviously you're dropping 2 of the forwards, but you've got an extra back there. 60-minute matches, so 3 periods of 20. I think that's potentially a real good idea. And then some changes to the.
There's been some changes to those, and I'll give you a heads up on, and perhaps you might be the first to second, I think, to get these, because they're not up on the website yet, but they'll be up there soon.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of feedback from all over the place, right? And it's been terrific, really, and it's been really positive. Most of the feedback has been very positive.
And who's that from? Is that from?
Oh, that's from ex-international coaches.
Okay.
Former international players.
Yeah.
From even former international referees have actually, come forward with really good suggestions to actually make it better. One of the areas that concerned me a little bit, but it became clear when people say, well, what's this position of rover that you've got, and I'd already it's a bit of a bullshit thing, I mean, I could never really fully understand why I had it in there, because they didn't actually do very much other than become a second scrum half or whatever. So what I don't want to do is have people like yourself, for example, rugby aficionado, sort of being put off by saying, well, what is that all about? So we're going to drop that position, and we're going to go to 13 aside.
Okay.
Now, immediately people will throw their hands up in horror and say, "Oh, you can't do that! You know, it's rugby league, rugby league." But it's just a number, you know. But we still have lineouts and we still have contested scrums, and you know, even though we're a bit like rugby league in that they allow the scrum half to put the ball into the second row most of the time, but which we will stop. But you know, it's so and it's a game for all size players still. Where rugby league's just a game for one type of player. You know?
Yeah, of course.
They're all pretty much the same. They can play, you know, fullback, or they can most likely even play hooker. And that would never happen. It's not going to happen in rugby rules either. So it's just a number. So that's something that's coming down the turnpike, as well as you know, some other sort of minor changes that we'll make. But I think that's one of the biggest ones.
How are you going to try and implement this? So obviously each union has their own governing body and then their own set of leagues and players, and then you're not just competing against rugby union here, like you said. It's rugby league, some Aussie rules. I don't know much about Aussie rules, but I love my rugby league as well. How are you going to implement this into? I suppose in union they have top tier 1 and tier 2 nations, but across some of those maybe more influential nations, by where then it can spread. How will you actually get this out to the people?
Right, that's a very good question, and I can answer that quite easily. Right, so we can't be all things to all people at the start. Right?
Yeah.
I've assembled a really terrific team, a lot of guys that used to work with me at New Zealand Rugby back when I was a chief executive there.
Yeah,
you know, and they're like me, you know, they're fed up, and anyway, I've got that little team together, and they've got an enormous amount of years of rugby administration. All of us, you know. I should add it all up one day so that I can roll off the tongue. But you know, we can't be all things to all people. We've got to raise money. We've got to get some structure in place. So once we finalise the final sort of iteration of the rules, and they're basically what they are now. So what do we do then? Where do we play this game? The first thing we've got to do is play it so people can see what it's like. So we're going to start at under 18s. We're going to start in the schools. We're going to start in those. Perhaps it might be more difficult under 18, but we'll still try. Our view is that if we can get those under 18s, like school first 15s and those sort of teams, kids playing it and enjoying it and understanding it. More importantly, if we can get their parents to understand it and to enjoy them watching it, then we're not going to lose players that we are currently losing because the parents won't let them play the game anymore.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, a lot of parents right across the world, you know, we're seeing comments like, we're not having our kids play this game. It's too brutal. And everybody, I mean, you listen to Eddie Jones and he revels in the idea of the brutality of rugby. Well, that's just so much rubbish, because if they're not careful, litigation's coming down the road at some point in time.
Yeah.
You have a look at the sort of things that Dylan Hartley, for example, recently came out to say.
Yeah.
And there are many other, when I saw that, I researched it a bit. There are many other players that have had to leave for injuries early. This is caused by the way that the games have been allowed to be played, concussions, which lead to mental health issues, all those sorts of things, right? And those are current issues. What about 20 years down the track? You know, when they can prove, it's like American football.
I was just about to say, like the NFL, they've already had cases like that now.
Yeah, exactly. So, but they don't want to do anything. They don't, and it's just like this with the ruck law. You know, they've got a law there. Why don't they apply it? Because they give in to a small coterie of international coaches that say, well, you can write the law like that, and you can have your nice, pretty pictures, but that's not the way we're going to play the game.
Yeah,
we're going to play the game the way we want to play it.
Yeah.
You take this cleaning out rubbish. I mean, there's nothing in the law that allows you to attack a player without the ball, which is what that is.
Yeah.
You know, and the players are bigger, faster, and stronger than ever before. So you get hit by one of those when you're not really expected.
Yeah.
I just had a gutful, mate, and you know, so I thought I'd, you know, as I said before, I'd do something about it.
Have you got any? Have you got any sort of current players or recently retired players that are still big names in the sport that are kind of on board with the thought of ambassadorial roles
Oh yeah,
and pushing that?
yeah. We've got some. We're not able to announce them yet.
Yeah, of
You know,
course. No, I get
we're
that.
working on the ambassadors. Got one guy you may have heard of, a guy called David Campese. Have you ever heard of him?
Yeah. He did one or two things in rugby, I think. Oh, don't quit now. Oh. Fuck's sake. Oh, fucking hell. Wi-Fi just fucking...
Hey, mate.
Sorry, mate. My Wi-Fi just
Sorry
decided to...
about that.
No, I think it was mine, mate. My Wi-Fi just cut out all of a sudden, but...
Oh, okay. All right. Do you want to carry on from where I finished then?
Yeah, so the last thing I heard was you saying about David Campese.
Yeah. I know that you've heard of Campo. He's a really good friend of mine.
Yeah.
And he's a bigger star up in the north than he is in Australia, which is a shame, to be perfectly honest with you. They don't use him anywhere near as enough. But once again, here's a guy that speaks his mind, and people don't like that. But he says of Rugby Rules, I've sent it to him. He says this is a game very close to the game I used to play. This is a game that I would like to play, but I wouldn't like to play the game that's currently being dished up.
Okay.
So, you know, that's a fairly decent sort of endorsement of what we're trying to achieve by somebody who knows what's going on.
It'd be interesting to see, because obviously up here, I'm not sure what it's like in the Southern Hemisphere at the moment, but up here, you know, you see a lot of people were looking at variations. I think Ben Ryan and a few people looking at variations of sevens, and they had that Rugby X. I think they held it in London, maybe, which is obviously five-a-side. But then here, you know, they've got rid of some of the sevens programs because of funding, and they obviously want to focus on the national teams. And you know, if that does well, that's where the money comes back in. So, do you guys see a lot of sort of fight back in terms of actually being able to get this funded, and then onto the, you know, from the 18s to the adults, and then onto TV and becoming part of that global game?
I don't quite know where it's going to end up. What I do know is that that we're starting a movement, and the fact that you wanted to talk to me, and I'm really pleased to be on here, is part of it, perfectly honest with you.
It's interesting.
So yes, we'll build momentum. We got off track a bit about the schools. So we've got 3 schools up in the UK that are seriously considering playing as soon as they can do contact with the COVID stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
We've got potential for some schools here in New Zealand, and in Australia, and we're hoping in South Africa as well. So once we've got, and we've got an enormous amount of support from unusual sources, people that would like to see this succeed, you know, from a commercial point of view.
Okay.
And offering help for nothing, you know. I mean, it's just crazy, really, because I think we've hit a chord with a lot of people.
Yeah.
And where we will hit a chord is with the parents of the kids, as I said earlier. You know, they want to see their kids play a sport. They like the idea of a contact sport,
yeah,
but they don't want to see their kids being, injured in such a way as it's going to affect them later in life.
Yeah.
And that's what we're seeing now with a lot of the players. But the other thing too that's quite clear, and it's been clear to me for a long time, is that the entire rugby administration right around the world are only 1% slice at the top.
Yeah.
The professional game. You have a look in Wales, and we perhaps will get onto this a bit more later, but you've just had a change of chairmanship there, and I would suggest to you that's largely been driven by the clubs.
Okay.
Who have said, you guys have left us behind yet again.
Yeah.
And it's not just in Wales, it's everywhere. It's everywhere where they're saying, in Australia, you look at the shambles that they've been now for so many years with their administration. And all you ever hear these people talk about when they get up, talk about the Wallabies or the All Blacks, or England or Wales or the national teams. That's all. That's all you ever hear. Sure, that generates the funds, but the game's in trouble, and it needs to start from the grassroots up. So that's why we're going to be the under-18s and the school kids.
No, it seems like a good approach. Again, you've probably two things on what you said there. Rugby is very different to, if you look at what we would call football, but down there, soccer. The clubs run independently of the national team, which they do here to an extent, but the clubs only care about the clubs essentially. Whereas the national team are always fighting against the clubs, but it's the clubs that bring in the revenue and the money because of sponsorship and TV rights and all that sort of stuff. I don't know if it'll get to that point where there's enough money in the game potentially, and I'm not best placed to talk about that, and I know little compared to you and other people in the game, but I don't know if it'll ever get to that point where there's so much money coming through that they don't have to almost all work together to fund the national team in terms of players. The All Blacks, which from the outside looking at it, is a different model where an island, they're centrally contracted. The players belong to Irish rugby or New Zealand rugby, but in England and Wales, it's just slightly different.
Yeah, it is different because they dropped the ball at the very beginning. They didn't go to work. So I was right at the beginning of it. We got the money in from Murdoch which ended up sending the game professional.
Yeah.
And what you're saying is correct. Don't get me talking about football at the moment, mate. My team, fair income. Losing to Everton at home in the first game of the season. Mourinho's got to go. Something's got to happen.
Have you seen on Amazon Prime All or Nothing with Spurs?
No, but I saw that Poch only watched the first 25 minutes of it.
Yeah, it's brilliant. So I'm fascinated by that behind the scenes. I loved the Michael Jordan, The Last Dance, that was on Netflix recently, and just that drive and mentality to win at all cost. And it's a really good insight into Spurs last season. And I've never been a fan of Daniel Levy just from social media and what you see in the press, but actually he comes across quite well, and Mourinho behind the scenes actually comes across well as well.
Yeah. So there's obviously talk about Gareth Bale going back to Tottenham.
Yeah.
You got to pay $600,000 a week to this guy. I think that's obscene money, isn't it? Really.
Yeah.
How many for his annual wage you could build a hospital or two.
Yeah, but it's not the players' fault. If that's the money that's coming into the game, if someone offers you it, you're going to take it.
Yeah, of course you're going to take it. There's a big difference between football and rugby, right? The money is big different. So here we have a situation in the Southern Hemisphere where the money coming into the game is reducing all the time because television rights values are going down. And because it's because it's a sport that's actually not so big, things are laid open very, for example, there's been a lot of talk recently about the amount of money that's wasted in administration costs, right? And the bloated, when I was at New Zealand Rugby, we had 30 people in the office. when they started laying people off here, they'd grown to 195 people at New Zealand Rugby.
Bloody
And I'd
hell.
hate to think what it is in England and places like that. And a lot of broadcasters are saying, hang on a minute, we're giving you millions. I mean, in Australia, for example, they poured billions of dollars into Australian rugby. And what have they got? And sponsors are starting to say, well, we're giving you a truckload of money. Where's this money going?
Yeah.
And it's not going where we want it to go, which is on a successful Wallaby side or Welsh side or things like that.
Yeah.
So there's some real issues, and then in the Northern Hemisphere, you've got CVC putting money into the game, right? And I think that's good, but the rugby unions are going to have to be very careful, because if they become too used to it and they don't get return on their investment, they'll just say this isn't for us. I mean, they paid £1 billion for Formula One and sold it for $4 billion, right?
Bloody hell.
So if people think that these guys are just like, the old benefactors, then they're sadly mistaken. These guys want a return on their money.
Well, there's talks up here of changing the leagues now as well, because obviously you've had the South African teams come into the Pro 14, and now they're on about a potential British and Irish league, and what can they do?
We'll get onto that. We'll get onto that in a minute, because I'd just like to sort of, if we on this section, finish off on rugby rules, right?
Yeah.
So I can do this quite quickly, because I'll encapsulate a few things.
Of course, yeah. Carry on.
So one is it's quite dangerous sport to play the way it's being played at the moment.
Yeah.
The second thing is there is no longer any contest for possession, Mikey. There is none. At the major phases of the game, you do not have a contest for possession. So take the breakdown, which should never happen, because they should be playing. As soon as somebody goes to ground and places the ball on the ground, it should be a ruck. Okay?
Yeah.
Instead of this crap they've got going on at the moment. So then at the ruck, you've got a contest for possession, potentially, because one player from either side, this is the way it's written in the rugby laws, in contact over the ball, and you can win the ball by using your feet, right? That's it. That's what a ruck says. That's what it says there. It's what we say a ruck should be.
Yeah.
You've then got a contest for possession. At the moment, at that sort of thing, you could find 19 penalties at that breakdown if you were really looking for it, right? So players and coaches are saying, well, don't engage in anything like that. Just fan out across the field.
Yeah.
And then the thought process is, okay, you're the team with the ball, you can keep it, right? And we'll just go from side to side, and we'll stop you making any ground unless we miss a tackle or something like that. But then they're so strong. So they're saying, we'll get the ball back when you drop it or knock it on.
Yeah.
Right. Or when you kick it. That's the only way they can get the ball.
Yeah.
Because they've given up on trying to get the ball from that breakdown contest situation. So there's the ruck. Take them all. Now, in this part of the ball, there's the only part of the game where you are encouraged to obstruct the opposition, be offside. Okay? So the ball goes in, immediately it's smuggled to the guy at the back who pretends to be part of the maul, tucks it under his arm, puts his hand up on the back of the player in front of him. How can the opposition get to that ball? They can't.
No.
But we're saying, oh, no, but that's okay. All these players in front of the ball are obstructing the opposition from getting at it, or they're offside. I mean, actually, they're both. Because it's the only part of the game where you can obstruct the team from getting at the ball.
And if you pull it down, it's a penalty straight away then anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So we say, that's fine. You can take the ball in to a maul. A maul's formed. And as long as you, the ball carrier, hang on to the ball, then the maul will continue. As soon as you transfer that ball back one player, then the ball has to be out within 10 seconds. There's no longer an opportunity. So the contestable opportunity there is for you as a defender need to put in some rippers, try and rip the ball off, because and if you don't commit enough players to that maul with that one guy carrying the ball, they'll continue to march down the field. So the imperative there is to get players into there, but also to try and get it out. because a lot of people are saying, oh, well, if they know that they've got to get the ball out within 10 seconds, if they move it, they don't have to move it from the ball carrier.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
So, so the next place where there is no contest for possession is scrums. Right? Scrums are used now to win penalties. That's where that's why everybody plays. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
They try and smash the opposing scrum. And that's not the way the game should be being played. That's cynical, and it's supported by everybody, in the administration. What we say about a scrum is there's only going to be 6 players in a scrum. You're going to come close together, and they're going to be, good binds and a good connection between the 2 scrums.
Good hit, yeah.
Normally, a scrum's got a tendency to scrum to go clockwise, okay? So it can't go any further than 45 degrees. The scrum can only be reset once. But here's the difference. One, the ball's going to go in straight, right? Start. And if it goes in straight, so then, what do? Just sit there, because both hookers are going to have to hook for the ball.
Yeah.
Then that'll change the dynamic of a scrum significantly, but it'll also put a contest into it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And once the ball's back, it's got a certain number of seconds to.
And that hook has gone from the game completely now, not like it used to be.
Absolutely. So they don't need to call them hookers. I don't know when they need to call them, But anyway, we're going to put the hooking back into hookers. So then the next phase of play where there's very little. It does happen, I admit this, but it's the line.
Yeah.
So there's no jumping in the line out in our game. It's become a lifting competition, which is absolute rubbish. It's not what line out should be about. It should be a mano a mano and a jumping competition for the ball, and also the ability to connect with the guy throwing the ball in. And there's a lot of other stuff around there. You will have seen it about the gaps between your own players and the opposition team, and that sort of thing. Because what we want to see is athleticism being rewarded, and that takes a little bit more out of the big forwards. If they've got to get up there themselves and get the ball instead of being lifted, and lifting. At the under 18 levels, that's a bit of a hit and miss affair. It is at the top level, but I mean, I'm not so sure. And the other thing too, mate, is safety. See, the fundamental principles of what we want to do is safety is a major issue for us.
Yeah.
And we're dealing with that. But the other thing is, it's got to be simple. It's got to be simple to play, coach, referee. More importantly, it's got to be simple to watch and to understand. Because, I mean, you're sitting in the grandstand. You're a guy who did about rugby. So you're sitting in the grandstand, and there's a penalty over here at this breakdown. This breakdown looks exactly the same, but there's no penalty given.
Yeah. And you get that in, obviously, scrums I wouldn't have the first clue about what goes on in the scrums in terms of what's a penalty and what's not.
That's essentially it. That's what we're trying to achieve.
And are you hoping to try and get the in play a lot higher in the games as well? Because you see some games, 20 minutes in play or 30 minutes in play. If you get 40 minutes in play, that's out of it. We'll
be going for more than that. One of the things that actually, it's really strange. When we thought we should be playing this game in 20-minute thirds, periods.
Yeah.
It's a great idea. When you think about it, one team's going to get the win twice.
Yeah, of course.
So it's not going to work. It works indoors, It's not, one of the things we got this out there was to find out what are the unintended consequences of what we're proposing.
Yeah.
And that was one that was brought out quite quickly, actually. So I was saying, well, if it's a pretty ordinary day, down there at, Sardis Road, and the wind's blowing, one team will get the benefit of it twice. And so you can't have that. So we're going to change that. And especially for kids, we're going to play it in quarters.
Okay.
now. And so we're still determining how long the quarters should be. And they most likely end up being 15 minutes, quarters, 60 minutes. But because the game stopped, because the clock stopped, same, at so many parts of the game, and so you're not bleeding off time. I mean, take the line out at the moment, right? So you got the team throwing the ball in, it's standing 10 meters away, and they have a half-hour conversation amongst themselves about what they're going to do. Then they amble up to the line of touch. Well, they would have been free kicked in our game because they got 20 seconds.
I was about to say, so are you going to be a bit like NBA where they've got the 24-second shot clock?
Yeah.
You're going to bring that into the game where, because again, another thing I seen the other day was conversions. And obviously you're supposed to get, was it 60 seconds from the point of being scored? And, people are taking 90 seconds, 100 seconds.
45 seconds, bang. That's it. And guess, there's a guy that's got this technology of lighting up the goalposts for in the conversions.
Goal Tech.
You know them.
Yeah. I know, Mikey Press, Goal Tech, Goal Light Technology.
Yep. That's right. So I've been talking to him.
Yeah.
And he said that they could have a shot clock somewhere on the posts which show how much time they've got left to kick or somewhere, So that shot clock technology is going to add to the drama for the fans.
And people want experience nowadays. It's not just about, it's the same as anything, when you go to a